Today on Inside Utah Politics, the 2021 legislative session. Senate leadership is here to look ahead at what we can expect from the whirlwind session, which kicks off this week. Plus, concerns over more potential violence with the presidential inauguration just days away. What's being done to beef up security?
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin today with Senate President Stuart Adams and Senate Minority Leader Karen Main. Senator, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, Glenn.
Let's start off with Salt Lake City schools. This is a very important topic and a controversial one as well. President, you have been very insistent that teachers and students get back into the classroom in person. Why is that?
Well, we've seen a 600% increase in the failure rate. And when Dr. Birx and Dr. Redfield, who heads up the CDC for the United States, were here at Thanksgiving time, they actually told us that there was no difference in the spread of the coronavirus with teachers that are teaching online or teaching in person. But there is a big difference for some students, as we saw, again, a 600% increase in the failure rate. We prioritize teachers with the vaccine, and they've been getting priority for a week, and we think it's time for them actually to get back in school to try to help these children. I think we need to do everything we can to make sure that our kids get the best education possible.
Senator Main, let's bring you in on this conversation. Do you believe this is the right approach that Republican leadership is taking here?
I think the teachers are going to be more comfortable. The vaccines are coming out, and I think they'll feel more safe. All the teachers want to be in person. Everybody wants to be in their classroom. But the different districts have chosen different ways to do that. But hoping now and starting this week is that that vaccine will be given out to the districts and to the teachers. I think that'll give comfort to the teachers and to the parents that their children are going to be safe.
So you're okay with the move being made to get into the classroom as soon as possible?
I think that my Senate district, my school district, I represent Granite School District, and they have been person to person, and that's the judgment that they made. Back again, I think all the teachers should, get the bonuses. They should get the opportunities to be safe, and I think we're starting now to have vaccines, and we hopefully get the kids back to school and make sure the teachers are taken care of and safe.
Okay. President, I want to get your thoughts on this. A lot of people have looked at this, or at least some anyway, and have said, this isn't a decision that you and the Speaker should be making. This is one the local school district should be making. Your response?
Again, we're doing everything we can to take care of kids. Education is always our #1 priority. And as we see a failure rate, what we're seeing, like we're seeing in the Salt Lake School District, we're trying to do everything we can to encourage our teachers to be able to accommodate that face-to-face learning. That's why we've prioritized the vaccine for teachers. It's what we're trying to do with bonuses. We've had teachers that have taught, I think, since August in in-person learning 5 days a week, and they've had to prepare joint lessons plans, both virtual and in person. We're trying to encourage teachers and districts to be able to do what's best for the kids.
Senator Main, do you have any problems with how this is kind of played out at the legislative level?
Going back to, the decision was being made by the different districts, and Salt Lake School chose another direction. I think that, like I say, going back to Granite, they chose some other way. I think that hopefully we can move on from this. We can move on. We're going to have vaccines, the bonuses, all those things in place. So hope all this comes together so that we can work together and everyone can be in person and that everybody can be safe and the kids can come back and everybody's comfortable.
Okay, this is a year like no other, so let's talk process. How is this all going to work? President, you sent out some guidelines during the week. Talk to us about how the session is going to play out. In person, remote, how's it going to work?
Well, we've made a lot of accommodation to make sure that we have a good public process. It's one of the most important things we can do in the legislative process to be able to get public input. So we've actually created 4 new committee rooms. In each of those committee rooms, in fact, all of our committee rooms, we're actually made them virtual compatible. That means that people can be sitting at home and actually join the committee, and they can see exactly what's going on, not just audio, which we've had in the past, but now video. and they can actually then participate and ask questions as if they're in the session. It's really, really important that the public have the ability to have input on our legislation.
Senator Main, are you okay and feeling good about transparency and how this will move forward?
You know, I do, because I think the citizens realize we're all in this pandemic together. And the President and I just had conversation about this a couple hours ago. We're all working to make sure we're safe. We're making sure that we want to have the public there, but we want to make sure they're safe. And the legislators, they have an input too. So working together, make it as open as we can, but we want it to be safe. And I think the citizens realize that, and I think they respect that, and they want that from us.
Something different this year as well with the passing of the amendment is that we're starting at a different time. We're starting on a Tuesday, ending on a Friday. Does that mean, President, that we will go till Friday, March 5th until midnight instead of normally like we end on a Thursday?
Well, we've ended early before. Hopefully we'll end early, and I think with
not enough, some would say.
I know that, but yes, we'll go till midnight, and I'm sure we'll have plenty to do. But again, we're looking forward to, again, a historic session with in a new environment, a virtual environment. We actually think there may be some advantages to it as we have more public input, more people be able to follow us online and virtually. You know, we love to have people be with us and in person, and there's really no substitute for that.
But just to be clear, President, lawmakers are planning to be on the Capitol grounds for the majority of the time. Is that correct?
Yes, I think most lawmakers will, by far the majority will be there in person.
All right, let's get into priorities, legislative priorities. Senator Main, let's start with you on this one. What are the most important issues that you and your colleagues need to tackle this legislative session?
I think we had a Zoom with the new governor, and his new budget we were impressed with. The things that are important to us: education, transportation, infrastructure, jobs, jobs, jobs. Those things were paramount, and we really appreciated that, because those are our priorities. That budget will come to the legislature, and we'll retool it, or prioritize how we feel. But that was a good start for us.
President, some of the priorities you're looking at as we head into the session.
Yeah, education is always our #1 priority. If you know what we did during the interim, we actually gave a 2% increase to teachers last fall in the middle of a pandemic. No other state in the nation did that. Executive appropriations voted in December to reinstate the 6% increase for education. We're funding education at the best we can at high levels. But this year, as we look at our budget, we've got about $1 billion surplus in one time, maybe $500 million ongoing. I think this year we probably ought to look at a tax cut, and 2021 may be the year of a tax cut.
It's quite amazing we're talking about a tax cut after going through a pandemic. How likely do you think that is, and what are the numbers we're looking at?
And again, I think it's really likely. We set aside $80 million a year ago. That $80 million is still there for a tax cut. And I think it speaks so highly of our business, and our business is being able to function safely. We've got the lowest case fatality rate in the nation, meaning the lowest fatality from COVID, and we have one of the best economies. The two good things happening in Utah, and I think the balance of both of those have given us a great budget, and we're stand poised to come out of this pandemic probably better than any other state in the nation. And Hawaii is actually laying off teachers. That's just a tragedy.
Senator Main, you mentioned that you really like what you saw out of the governor's budget proposal. I've heard the same thing from other Democrats, getting rave reviews. How likely do you think the legislature is to stick with that guideline?
Well, every budget that comes down, we retool it. There are things we want, priorities, and things that monies we might want to move around, and we have the ability to do that, and we're going to work together with that. And going back to the tax cut, taking the tax off Social Security, that's been a hallmark for Democrats. I sat on the Tax Reform Commission, and that's what I brought to that commission. We need to take that tax off seniors. I've seen $48,000. I think it should be higher than that when you have a couple, both of them bringing in Social Security. I think that should be higher. I think that we should look at those military retirements. If we want the military to retire here, then we need to make Utah becoming to them that it's a place they want to be, of course, but then our financial help and our financial vision for them is compatible where they want to be. So I hope those two things come into play. I think they should be.
All right, there was more I wanted to get into with both of you, but unfortunately we have run out of time. Things are going to be kicking off in a couple of days. Should be a fun one to watch. Going to be different from for us from a media perspective as well. Appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
It'll be a historic session.
Yes,
we'll see you there.
No doubt about that. Still to come, we're actually going to stick with the 2021 legislative session. Salt Lake Tribune political correspondent Brian Schott will join us a little later as we continue our preview. But first, giving the vaccine rollout a shot in the arm. What's being done to speed up what has been a lackluster process? In just a few days, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be sworn in as president and vice president. Already, authorities are bracing for protests in the nation's capital on Inauguration Day. In fact, D.C. officials are asking for federal help to ensure nothing gets out of hand. Washington correspondent Anna Wernicke has more on how lawmakers are preparing for the big day.
In just over a week, all eyes will be on Washington as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are sworn in on the steps of the U.S. Capitol.
The three branches come together. You're outside, both from the ground and the air. There's a lot to worry about.
As the head of the congressional committee overseeing the inauguration, Missouri Republican Senator Roy Blunt says after Wednesday's deadly riot at the Capitol, security will be a lot tighter.
Frankly, the government's probably more vulnerable at that moment than almost any other moment.
D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser says she's asking for additional federal help
to protect the District of Columbia from a repeat of the violent insurrection experienced at the Capitol.
Mayor Bowser says she's requesting the coordination of all federal agencies to assist with the preparations, including daily intelligence and threat briefings from the FBI.
We'll do everything we could possibly do, as we do every 4 years, to ensure that nothing does go wrong.
Biden's inaugural committee says crowds are expected to be a lot smaller, with many of the events happening virtually, including a parade across America, highlighting the theme, America United. Maryland Democratic Senator Ben Cardin says he hopes Americans use the moment to come together.
It's going to be a historic moment, one our nation needs to celebrate.
President Trump said last week he will not be attending. In Washington, I'm Anna Wernicke.
Instead of maintaining a reserve, the Trump administration will begin releasing all of the country's COVID-19 vaccines. The Biden administration had already planned to end the current policy of holding back supply for second doses. Washington correspondent Jesse Tenor reports on new guidelines to distribute the vaccine.
Get more and more of the vulnerable individuals in our country vaccinated.
Operation Warp Speed officials reported the U.S. has now vaccinated about 9 million people against COVID-19, but produced nearly 40 million doses.
We clearly have enough vaccine at this point to begin to expand.
CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield urged states to start vaccinating those 65 and older, as well as those 64 and younger with documented comorbidities. Health Secretary Alex Azar promised more doses to states with higher numbers of these groups.
Every vaccine dose that is sitting in a warehouse rather than going into an arm could mean one more life lost or one more hospital bed occupied.
Under new guidelines, Azar said the states also doing a better job distributing the vaccine will receive more doses.
That should not necessarily hurt many states, but will enhance the benefit to those that are actually getting vaccines done and performed.
Data from some states continues to show slow distribution efforts. While Redfield is investigating if it's a reporting problem, Azar blamed some state leaders.
Some governors have overreacted.
Azar said the new performance incentives should fix any backlog.
If you try to be too micromanaged, too tailored, too focused, you let the perfect be the enemy of the good in a mass vaccine campaign like this.
These officials said if supplies start to run low, Americans who need their second dose will get first priority. In Washington, I'm Jesse Tenor.
Still to come, we are turning back to the 2021 legislative session. More on what to expect after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now for a media perspective on the 2021 legislative session. For that, we turn to Brian Schott. He is a political correspondent for the Salt Lake Tribune. Brian, great to have you with us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for the invite.
You got it. Hey, let's start off with process. This is going to be a different year, unlike anything we've ever experienced, even from our perspective. How are you expecting the process to play out and how it might change the way you cover the legislature?
Well, it's going to be slow because you're going to have a hybrid session. A lot of lawmakers are going to be joining remotely, and that just slows things down. So the process will be moving along much slower than usual. And what legislative leaders have been saying to lawmakers is get your bills in the process early, because they're also worried that we could have an outbreak of coronavirus that would shut things down. So, who knows how that's going to play out. They want to get the budget stuff done as soon as possible. So then if they have to shut things down, then they can come back later and work on some of the policy bills.
How are you anticipating this working for you? Are you going to be up physically at the Capitol on a daily basis? Are you going to do a mix of remote covering and in-person? How are you going to work it?
I'm going to try to be up there as much as I can because, frankly, from a reporter standpoint, that's how you get all the good stuff. The problem is there's not a lot of access for us this year. We can't get out on the House floor at all. We can't go in the back hallways of the House. So, if a lawmaker wants to avoid me this year, they're going to have all sorts of excuses to do that. So it makes my job a little bit harder to track those guys down.
Avoid you, Brian Schott? Come on. That doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah, yes it does, actually.
I also thought it was interesting. I know I'm pretty sure you've picked up your credentials. I did as well. We've actually, you mentioned all those places we're not going to be able to go, but we have fobs that will give us access to the building ourselves at times. So that's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, and as it broke a little bit earlier this week, a couple of days ago, that the Capitol is going to be shut down for the first few days of the session, at least for the public, out of an abundance of caution because they're worried about some of those protests turning violent. So, it's going to be a really weird season. Essentially, the entire third floor is cut off right now. And lobbyists, I don't know how they're going to do their job. I'm hearing they're being encouraged to do more one-on-one meeting rather than aggregate, standing in a herd outside the doors of the House and the Senate. They're not going to be allowed to do that this year. So it's just going to be a really strange session.
Yeah, all across the board, no doubt about that. Brian, want to get your thoughts on the new governor, Spencer Cox, coming in for his first legislative session. How do you expect the governor's relationship to match with the legislature?
Well, so far, it's been good. They've really tried to work together and be collaborative. He's reached out a lot, and I think that's a good thing. He's not an unknown commodity up on the Hill. He's been around since 2013, but he's in the big chair right now, and it's time to strap on the shoulder pads because he's moved into the big leagues. And so, I expect there will be some flare-ups. I expect there will be some disagreements. How he handles that, I'm not sure, but and you know this as well as I do, the legislature, even though they are a co-equal branch of government, they see themselves as first among equals. Mm-hmm. And so, if push comes to shove, there's 104 of them and one of him. So, that could play out. And I'm not sure where we might see that flare up. It might be during the budget. It might be, out of some bill that just comes out of nowhere. But I haven't really seen any areas that are an inflection point yet.
I want to ask you a little bit more about the budget, because I have heard from, and I'm sure you have too, Democrats are telling me they really like what he put on the table. Are you surprised by that at all?
Yeah, well, the big secret is the legislature completely ignores what the governor puts on the table, at least for the most part. And really, what I've seen in Governor Cox's budget is nothing that the Republicans in the legislature hadn't already proposed. There's a lot of money for education. There's the teacher bonuses. Yeah, there's a few things here and there for rural Utah, and that's good stuff, and infrastructure building. But it's really not too far out of the ordinary of what the Republicans were already already thinking of doing. Now, it's going to be an interesting year because they have almost $1 billion of new revenue to spend. So they've got a lot of cash to spend and a lot of places that need cash. So we'll see how they divvy that up.
Yeah, that's something we will definitely be watching for sure. What else are you going to be keeping your eye on? What are some of the big bills that are at the top of your radar?
Well, you know, police reform is probably going to be a big issue. And then another fight that I'm looking at is what are the governor's emergency powers? As you know, we've been living under a state of emergency because of the coronavirus pandemic since March. And the legislature has a great point. They say we're not designed to live under emergency for that long. So there's going to be a big, I guess, discussion that could turn into a fight over how they rein in, how they change those powers. I'm also watching to see if there's an overreaction to what happened with the pandemic, because you know anything the legislature does is not addressing what's happening right now. It will be for the next time, and I wonder if they're going to overstep their bounds on that.
Right, that's a good point. I want to get your thoughts on redistricting. Obviously, this will extend well beyond the legislative session. We have the new commission this time around that will be drawing out maps and making their recommendations to the legislative committee. What are you going to be watching for? Because this is a big deal, and it is going to play out, as I mentioned, throughout the year. What are you going to be watching for there?
Well, you're not going to see much action during the upcoming session. The only action is going to be who gets on the committee for the legislature. You did mention that we do have the commission, but that's just an advisory board. So, you know, don't. That's when everybody's going to get really upset, when they present their maps and the legislature does what they want anyway, which is the way that we knew that it was going to go down when this thing passed. So, you know, there has been some talk of getting together and maybe working with them collaboratively, but at the end of the day, the legislature and most importantly, the Republicans hold the big hammer, and they're going to do what they want.
Yeah. I want to get your thoughts on the new administration on the national level as well. We saw some interesting plays over the last couple of years, if you will, with our state legislature resolving to support the president. Of course, we saw an effort to censure Mitt Romney. How do you think things will play out any differently under a Biden administration as opposed to a Trump administration?
I think the big point of conflict is going to be over public lands, and it's going to be mainly over Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. As you know, President Trump reduced those, and there's a push to have the new President Biden reinstate those. And I was speaking with House Speaker Brad Wilson, and he said, you know what, we just want to have some sort of resolution on this. And so they've actually been trying to reach out to the Biden administration. Now, they've got a lot of other stuff on their minds, obviously, since they're taking office, but they've been trying to reach out to them to figure out if there is a way that they can get together and talk and maybe find some sort of compromise. But that's where the really big issue is going to be first, just the whole thing about public lands here in the state.
Yep. All right, Brian, here we go again. Just in a couple of days, things will get underway. You do great work up at the Capitol. How can our viewers follow that work and keep up with you?
Well, I have a newsletter that goes out every single morning. It's called The Rundown. You can subscribe for that for free at sltrib.com. I also have a podcast called Utah Politics that's also available for free.
Yeah, and this is actually a payback appearance for me being on your podcast one time, right?
Well, it's now your turn to come on mine.
Yep, there we go. All right, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. The first day of the general legislative session, we've been talking about it. It's this Tuesday, January 19th. The presidential inauguration is the following day, Wednesday the 20th. And then the final day of the legislative session is Friday, March 5th. Make sure to connect with me on social media. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues that are important to you. You can email me at InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Just log on and search Glenn Mills ABC4. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.